So thank you so much for joining me today. I'd like to get us started by having you introduce yourself and your role here at the University of Michigan.
My name's Will Potter. I came to Ann Arbor last year as a Knight Wallace Fellow, which brings journalists from all over the world for a year of study and research here at the university. And I was really fortunate that it turned into a visiting professor position.
Oh, wow.
Now I'm teaching courses on investigative journalism and whistleblowing and social movements here at the university.
Wow, that's fantastic. So are you in the Communication Studies department?
Yeah, in the communication studies.
Very cool. So given that you have a lot of journalistic background, can you talk a little bit about the types of experiences that you've had as a journalist and in interacting with academics?
So I've kind of had a unconventional career path as a journalist. Spent a lot of time, reporting and writing for newsrooms and magazines. And then over the years, it evolved into not only writing my original reporting, but also speaking about it with the media. So doing television and radio and print interviews as a source rather than a journalist.
Very cool.
And then that kind of also evolved into a day job for a while doing public relations.
Wow.
So I've seen the interrelations with the media from a lot of different perspectives as journalist, public relations rep, and also as a media commentator.
And so as a public relations rep, so you've had some experience with interacting with researchers and trying to help them translate their findings to wider public.
Absolutely. I mean, that was a core part of my work. And also I've done a lot of consulting, media trainings and speaker trainings about specifically that. All this great research has been done. How do we take it and package it in a way that not only is going to get media interested in covering the issue, but then covering it in the way that is accurate and continues the story that's been created.
Okay, so I know this is a little bit off book, but can you give us your sort of top 3 tips for accomplishing those goals?
Oh, so I think my most important sounds kind of silly, but it's think about telling the story to your mother. Because I think, all of us, or at least personally speaking, my mom is really supportive, maybe not informed about all the details of what I'm working on. And so whenever I'm thinking about doing media interviews, I'm trying to speak to someone like that.
Yeah.
Expecting the best, knowing that they're on your side, they want to hear about this, but they don't have all the background that you do. So that would far and away be my most important tip. The second would be to be available, to recognize that reporters are on deadline, that they might be annoying and pressing and, with those deadlines sometimes, but they don't have a choice.
Yep.
So if you can work around their schedule, you're going to get placed in stories a lot more frequently.
Sure.
And then the third would be to just talk conversationally. You have to remember that you're not speaking in an academic context. You're not talking with other researchers. You're talking to people that might have just found out about your issue that morning when they got the assignment from their editor to write the story. We hope not. We hope they've done their research, but
reality
chances
is
are,
reality.
or they might be an intern. You have no idea who's handling this assignment. So you want to make your story conversational and approachable, and really don't be afraid of what we would think is dumbing it down. I would like to say it's just being conversational.
Yeah, I tend to agree. So as a science communication person, I really hate the term dumbing it down.
Right.
I think that it's really just meeting your audience where it is. Do you agree with that perspective or no?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, in recognizing that people are all in different stages of education about these issues. And you want to be able to speak in a way that is welcoming to the most people possible. And that doesn't mean, like you said, you're dumbing it down or diluting your message. You're just telling that message in a different form. So if you think about it, you have multiple iterations of a story with your research. There's the story that you publish in an academic journal. There's the story you tell your students about what you're doing. And I think this is just another version of that, speaking about your work in a different way.
Absolutely. Oh, I love it. So I want to shift gears a little bit and start talking about what it's like to work in the media space specifically. So as a journalist, who do you interact with when you're starting to construct a story, especially a story about something like a scientific research project?
So there are a couple different approaches. I mean, for the reporters who are covering science and medicine technology as their beat, they have a few different types of sources. I mean, they have people that they're checking in with regularly that are giving that big, 10,000, 20,000 foot overview of what the story means. Is it significant? This is yet another study about coffee being good for your health.
Yeah.
Is this true? What, weigh this in terms of the other peer-reviewed research that's out there, right?
Yeah.
And then there are the sources that are specifically related to that breaking news. So the people that are involved in the study or at the university, whatever, that you need to get that quote from because they are the people involved.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, I mean, most of these types of stories, you want an outsider perspective. I
Absolutely.
mean, someone that's speaking to either the significance of the research, what ramifications it has for other areas, how wonderful or how terrible it is. I mean, it's kind of formulaic in some ways, but all those voices have a role in the story.
So when you're looking for this outside voice, I'm curious who it is that you're looking for. Are you looking for other researchers? Or are you looking for somebody who might be impacted from a policy standpoint? Like who is it that you're searching for this other source?
It'd really be all of those things. I mean, so for instance, if you're doing a story about a new cancer study or research, some of the obvious, go-tos would be a compelling human narrative about a family that this is their hope right now. Or it could be a member of Congress or a policymaker, a lobbyist who is trying to get funding for this to reframe the public discussion about these issues. It could be, just people out in the field at the hospitals or in the, science community that have that experience and can add just another voice. And it really depends on the story. And I think it depends on what's available to those reporters at the time. I mean, you can't use that classic hero narrative or victim narrative with every story. It depends on who's available and what they have.
And then also probably, I'm guessing here, but so please correct me if I'm wrong, also the length and also the slant that maybe your editor is looking for you to take. Is that accurate?
So if someone is covering a story as a breaking news piece, that's going to be very, very different than if they're writing for Science Magazine, or if they're writing for Mother Jones or New York Times, or doing a video on Vice. All of those things have very different formats and needs.
Absolutely.
But I would argue that the same researcher can hit all of those areas and be an expert in all those areas. But you have to change your message. I mean, you can't talk about science or research with Vice the same way you're going to speak to a science magazine or with the New York Times magazine on a 20-page feature cover story. I mean, all of those things are very different.
Absolutely. So we'll come back to messaging in just a couple of minutes because I think that you have a lot of really incredible insights and I'd really look forward to having you share them with our participants. For now, let's stay a little bit focused on audience, and I'd like you to talk about what kind of goals you go into an interview with somebody like a scientist if you're trying to help them uncover a story that you're covering.
Right. So my approach with interviews in general is just to let the person I'm interviewing know that they should assume I know absolutely nothing about the topic.
Okay.
Now, hopefully, I've had the time to do my due diligence and do my background research, but I still want them to speak to me in that way and not assume that I know some incredible detail in their mind that they're not sharing with me. But after we establish that, there are a couple approaches to it. I'm looking for the social significance. As a journalist, I want to connect this story to my readers.
Absolutely.
That's the only way it's going to get published.
Yep.
So, I don't want to stretch the truth in that regard.
Of course.
Or show that some research is going to be applicable in a way it's not. But if I can connect those, that's going to make a much better story. In addition to that, if I can show if this is part of a trend, is it part of a bigger story, a bigger cultural narrative that we're dealing with as a country right now, a bigger crisis that the nation is facing? Can you connect it to a bigger story? So really those two levels.
Absolutely. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And then I guess since you've worked some with researchers to help them shape these types of stories for journalists, can you talk for just a minute about what kinds of goals the researcher should have when interacting with a journalist or with a public relations professional?
Yeah, I think the most important, it sounds kind of silly, but it's just to be conversational and approachable. I mean, to me, researchers, you really want to do two things. You want to be, featured in that breaking news story about some incredible work you've done. But you also want the long-term relationships. So at a place like the University of Michigan, we have all these world-class experts that some of them have ongoing relationships so that whenever a story comes up anywhere in the orbit of what you work on, you can get an informal, off-the-record email or phone call to check in with you. To me, that's so much more valuable than being the one who's actually quoted every time, because you're directly shaping the story. You're helping reporters understand what's worth focusing on and what's not.
Yeah.
So if you can build that relationship, you're going to be doing fantastic.
Yeah.
And also, hopefully, it takes some of the pressure off of researchers with thinking they have to be the face in front of the camera all the time.
Sure.
If you're really horribly uncomfortable with that, there's still a role for you to play with the press as being the background, off the record, conversational, grabbing coffee, whatever, dealing with reporters in that way.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I really appreciate that you highlighted that difference between being quoted on the record and also playing a role in shaping the story off the record. I think that that's really important and not something that a lot of researchers really have a decent grasp of.
No, and I think people get really intimidated by it. I mean, you start throwing around terms that have very specific meanings, and people are afraid that if they don't use it the right way, they'll be misquoted. And all those concerns are valid, and I understand them. But just be upfront when you're dealing with journalists and say, I'm not sure the right terminology to use is if it's deep background, if this is completely off the record, if this is not for attribution. But what I want to do is tell you what I'm thinking, and then I don't want my name anywhere in the paper. That's fine to say. Just be upfront with them.
Yeah. And it seems like the more that you build the relationship with the journalist, the easier it is to have that type of conversation, and the more you sort of get immersed in that type of lingo, those types of jargon words, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I have plenty of sources who have consistently fed me stories off the record, on deep background, no attribution, no fingerprints on it, either through anonymous leaks or people who I know that I can't reveal their identity. And it's just understood. I mean, then there are other sources that I know they're so busy that when I'm calling them, it's to get the quick soundbite.
Got it.
And they can do that for me really quickly.
Sure.
And then we get it, we're done, they move on, I move on, and it's just a different type of relationship. I mean, I try to tell people it's just like we have different types of friendships and office relationships. It's just like that with dealing with the press. Sometimes you want to spend, or will be spending, lots of time on background with hour-long conversations, and other times you're just getting a quick phone call.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I really appreciate you sharing those perspectives. I think that they'll be really valuable for our Teach Out participants.
My pleasure.
Yeah.